On March 13th, 1964, a woman named Kitty Genovese was stabbed to death outside her apartment building in New York City. The attack lasted 35 minutes. 38 people witnessed it. Nobody called the police until it was over. When reporters asked the witnesses why, the answers were all variations of the same thing. I didn't want to get involved. I thought someone else had already called. I figured it wasn't my business. The story ran on the front page of the New York Times and spread across the world. It became the defining image of urban apathy. Cold city, cold people. Nobody cares about anyone anymore. That was the story everyone told. It was also wrong. And the real explanation is far more disturbing than simple apathy, because it doesn't require cold people at all. It only requires a crowd. Two social psychologists at Columbia University, John Darley and Bib Latane, read the Genovese story in 1964 and had a different reaction to everyone else. Not outrage, a hypothesis. What if the 38 witnesses didn't fail to act despite the crowd? What if they failed to act because of it? They designed an experiment. College students were placed in individual cubicles and told they would be having a group discussion over an intercom about the pressures of university life. Each participant believed they were talking with either one other person, two other people, or five other people. What they didn't know was that everyone else on the intercom was recording. A few minutes into the conversation, one of the recorded voices began to have what sounded like a seizure, choking, gasping, asking for help. Then, silence. Here is what happened. When participants believed they were the only other person on the intercom, that it was just them and the person seizing, 85% left their cubicle to get help. Almost immediately, when they believed there were two others also listening, that number dropped to 62%. When they believed five other people were also on the line, it dropped to 31%. Same emergency, same sounds, same person choking. The only variable was how many people the participant believed were also hearing it. The more people present, the less likely any individual was to act.
Darley and Latane called it the bystander effect. And the mechanism underneath it is not cruelty. It is not apathy. It is something your brain does automatically without asking your permission. It is called diffusion of responsibility. When you are alone and something goes wrong, the responsibility is unambiguous. It sits entirely with you. Your brain registers it and your body moves. But the moment other people enter the picture, that responsibility doesn't stay with you. It spreads, dilutes, distributes itself invisibly across every person present. Each individual feels like they carry only a fraction of the obligation to act. And a fraction of an obligation feels optional in a way that a full obligation does not. Nobody decides to let someone die. They just each decide, separately, that surely someone else is handling it. But it goes deeper than responsibility. There is a second mechanism running at the same time, called pluralistic ignorance. In an ambiguous situation, and most real emergencies look ambiguous in the first few seconds, people look at each other to figure out how to respond. If everyone around you looks calm, your brain concludes the situation is probably fine. You don't act because no one else is acting, and no one else is acting because no one else is acting. The crowd reads itself as evidence that nothing is wrong. Everyone is waiting for someone else to define the situation. Nobody does. And so the situation stays undefined, while someone needs help. This is not a character flaw. It has been replicated in dozens of studies across different countries, different emergencies, and different types of crowds. It shows up in children as young as 5. It shows up in medical professionals. It shows up in people who would describe themselves as the type of person who always helps. It shows up in you.
The Kitty Genovese story itself turned out to be more complicated than the original reporting suggested. Later investigations found that the witness count and the details had been exaggerated by the Times. Some witnesses did call out. The timeline was murkier than presented. But this is the strange part. The correction didn't matter scientifically. Because by the time researchers checked the original story, Darley and Latane had already run the experiments. And the experiments worked. The effect was real, whether or not Genovese's case was exactly as reported. The story was flawed. The phenomenon it pointed toward was not. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Think about every time you walked past someone who looked like they needed help and told yourself someone else would handle it.
Think about every online pile-on you watched and did nothing about because thousands of others were already watching. Think about every meeting where something wrong was said and the room stayed quiet, and you stayed quiet with it because everyone else did. The bystander effect is not something that happens to other people in other cities in 1964. It is running right now, in every crowd you have ever been part of, in every group you belong to. Every time the number of people present makes you feel less responsible than you actually are. Darley and Latané found one reliable way to break it: specificity. The diffusion of responsibility only works when no individual is singled out. The moment you point at one person, you in the red jacket, call an ambulance, the responsibility can no longer diffuse. It lands. And when it lands on a specific person, they almost always act. The crowd doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you feel like a fraction of one. And fractions don't act. People do.